Good afternoon. I hope everybody is doing well out there today. This is video number 4 from my YouTube channel, Writer, Poet, Philosopher Don. Today's subject is something that, unfortunately, all of us have to deal with almost all the time. The subject is fear. It is said that fear is the first emotion you ever feel, and that being born is possibly the most frightening experience you will ever have. Imagine that you are so comfortable, just sort of hanging out in this nice warm sack of amniotic fluid, and all of a sudden you are being forced out of this tiny hole head first. And then what happens? Someone holds you upside down and smacks your tiny baby butt, and then you get to breathe. It's no wonder that all babies are born crying. From the beginning of our lives, we are taught that there are certain things we should fear, and then there are things which we are just afraid of just by instinct. The first thing that comes to my mind is snakes. A child is naturally attracted to something warm and cuddly like a dog, or something colorful and fast like a bird or a butterfly. But a snake that comes whizzing out from behind a bush, or when you turn over a rock, instantly produces a frightened response. As we grow up, there are fears which we acquire, some rational, some not, some of which we rationalize in order to justify them to ourselves. Those are the fears that paralyze our progress as human beings. We all have them and no one wants to discuss them. Sometimes they are multi-layered fears piled on top of fears, mutually reinforcing. And when confronted with them, we become obstinate and feel the need to defend ourselves, which is exactly the opposite of what we should do. But our ego, which works hard to maintain the status quo, helps us manufacture reasons why our fears are perfect for us and why we should feel good about having them, even when they make us feel miserable. On an individual basis, our fears hold us back from achieving our highest potential. In fact, our fears can cause psychological paralysis if we let them. When I start to feel like that, I try to remind myself that all fears are relative. What seems like a huge problem to me may be nothing to someone else. My wife and I watched an excellent reminder of that recently. There's a new show on a cable station called Earth's Natural Wonders. I thought it was going to be your standard nature show, but the show is really about how people in remote places around the world survive in very difficult circumstances. Like the villagers in Zambia who have to navigate a river infested with alligators and then dodge a herd of elephants in order to fish about 5 feet from the edge of Victoria Falls. Or the Sherpa who has to clear a route up Mount Everest a week before 200 paying mountaineers try to make the summit, then watch several of his friends die in an avalanche, which cancels the entire climbing season. I don't know about you, but my own fears feel pretty small after watching something like that. On a societal level, we have been shown how fear can be an incredibly powerful force. The protesters who broke into the Capitol are very afraid. They have one of the most common fears that we know of, the fear of change. They see their vision of a poorly educated, mediocre white America vanishing before their eyes, and they are very afraid. They forget that change is the only constant in life, and that resistance to change is the most well-trodden path to personal stagnation. The problem is that's all they know. They live in an insulated white world where the desire for knowledge and personal growth are seen as a weakness to be mocked and ridiculed. Their own fears and weaknesses were perfectly exploited by a man who lacks any semblance of morality or conscience. Who better to lead a crowd of fearful people than a man whose greatest fear is having to admit that he lost the most important contest of his life in front of the whole world? Soon to be former President Trump channeled his fear and stoked the fear and anger of his supporters until they were in such an irrational state that they tried to overthrow the very government that made their lives possible. They probably never gave any serious thought to the consequences of their actions. Now many of them may have many years to think about it. Sedition carries a sentence of up to 20 years. And the man they are loyal to was nowhere near the scene of the crime. He was on TV, watching on TV and laughing while 5 people died and our country disgraced itself on the world stage. Some of them will probably still feel justified. My heart is heavy for the dead and the families they leave behind. Admittedly, this is an extreme example, but it should serve as a warning not to let your fear drive you to irrationality. The consequences can be very severe. It is the courage of all of us to confront our fears that drives us forward. Your personal victory can be the start of a positive revolution, And wouldn't that be a nice thing? Please click the red button and subscribe if you like what you see here. Ring the bell to be notified of further posts, and leave a comment if you wish. Have a great day. Be safe and stay happy.